Hey, is this thing on? Are we recording? Can I get a tech person? Oh, for the love of ed tech. Why, hello.
Hi, Kara.
How are you, Corinne? You ready for another one of these?
I am. Who are we talking to today?
We are talking to Mike Corcoran. He's joining us from Preble, Darke County ESC.
I know Mike has a really unique perspective, so hopefully we can get him to talk a little bit about his kind of his journey into ed tech. Because if you think our roads are kind of twisty turny, wait until you hear how Mike ended up here.
I'm sure he'll maybe throw in some good tips or tricks for us. Maybe some video lesson creation.
Yep, and that's such a great tool or technique to have in your teacher toolbox. Some more about that and how he recommends people go about it, and kind of a cost benefit analysis for creating those.
Yeah, for sure. Joining us today is Mike Corcoran, Technology Coordinator with Preble and Darke County ESC. We would just like to say, welcome, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is actually my first time meeting Mike, so I'm excited to add another connection here. So if you could just, I guess, introduce yourself maybe to me, or because Corinne already knows you, kind of who are you and what do you do with the ESC?
So I have been with the ESC for, I think, about 7-8 years now. The Preble County ESC originally hired on with them. And it turned out that the technology director at the Darke County ESC was retiring after my first year at Preble. And she and I had known each other from the past. So she recommended me to the district. They brought me on. And so now, as a technology coordinator for both districts, in simplest terms, I manage all the technology for the districts, for both staff and students. We have preschools at both. We have an alternative school at Preble. We have teachers who are out in the field in various school districts. I support them with the technology. I manage all of the background stuff to include various softwares. Google now, it used to be G Suite, and now it's Google Workspace or whatever they're going to come up with next week.
Right.
It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. Maintain the website. And then, as my contract says, all duties as assigned. So oddly, because we're in an ESC situation, my job goes well beyond technology stuff, and I'm involved in basically anything you can think of in the district. Actually served as a substitute teacher Friday because we had a shortage of teachers. So,
oh, wow.
Again,
So literally anything. Yeah.
Yeah. All duties as assigned.
I should insert really quickly, just for those of you that may not be familiar with the concept of an ESC, it stands for Educational Service Center. So I know that that's not necessarily a state-by-state maybe label. And I feel like in education, we have all these little acronyms for everything, and we can have our own little conversations in code. So yeah, that's great. How many teachers between the two ESCs do you think that you're kind of serving? Or staff, or
staff is probably a more accurate description. And for those who may not be in Ohio, or I'll be honest with you, I've met plenty of people in Ohio who have no concept of what an ESC does.
Mm-hmm.
But in Ohio, every county has an educational service center. And the idea is that the educational service center provides services to the districts, typically for things that they either cannot provide financially for themselves, or there's some other logistical reason why it makes more sense to have a consortium model. So we provide things like speech pathologists and school psychologists and people who have specializations in special education and those kinds of things. And then we often house the preschools, or for all the county, we just have a variety of services to include busing and those kinds of things. So if we go full personnel, then we're talking about busing, support personnel, teaching staff, and everything. At Preble and Darke, I'd say we're averaging about 65 to 70 employees each.
Okay.
As far as just teachers, Preble County, between our MD program, multiple disabilities, ED program, educational or emotional disability students, we're probably at about 15 teachers plus probably 40 aides. It's similar numbers in Darke County. So, a pretty good array of people and all in different capacities.
Okay. Check and beyond.
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Well, so I have a question involving, the shutdown and, coming out of this moment in time of our quote unquote new normal. What were some of your biggest struggles through all of that with all the staff that you work with?
Our biggest struggle was really in the logistics of working with parents and students at home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that's necessarily indicative of most school districts. For us, we were already one-to-one with our students. And so we had the technology in place to be able to allow students to work from home immediately. Now, for schools who did not have that capacity, that became a whole new story. And they're often relying upon parents having things at home. However, both Preble and Darke County are rural communities, and they would be considered low socioeconomic areas. And because they're rural, not only do you deal with the socioeconomic part, whereas in some cases, the only internet connectivity that parents have at home might be a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Often that cell phone is not a stable platform. It's not always the best carrier that provides that service. But because they're rural, they often have no access to internet other than a cellular connection. So no broadband connection at all. Often the phone is the only technology device in the house. So you had situations where kids were trying to do stuff online, be it Google Classroom or whatever, and they're relying upon their parents' cell phones and sometimes an unstable connection. For parents who may have had technology at home, let's assume that they have a laptop that they brought home from work and they have internet. That might be the only device in the house. And so now you have parents trying to balance what they need, working from home and giving their child access to that same shared piece of technology. So now that can be a very different situation in other districts. That's what we dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
The positive part for us was that in both districts, and of course, my connection with SOITA has always been that I do a lot of training with teachers. And so we had done lots of professional development on how to work online with students, work using Google Apps for Education or other platforms, how to create a library of video lessons and such. So while it came suddenly and through teachers from, here's what we recommend you do into this is how you have to do this now, they at least had that background. So for us, the biggest obstacle was the technical challenge of lack of internet and resources at home.
Okay. I feel like your teachers were ahead of the game, like having the knowledge and having been prepared for that piece of it. So applause to you for that.
Well, and I think our teachers were, of course, like any professional development, you can go in and teach all you want, and they can sit through the session and walk away and say, "Yeah, I'll never use that." Fortunately, our teachers were incredibly dedicated. They really wanted to make this work, and they wanted the best environment and learning experience for the kids. So they worked very hard to make all of this work. And from a tech standpoint, I can make the technology work, but the credit really goes to the teachers for having that dedication and commitment to creating the best environment.
So I'm just curious how you ended up in educational technology. Corinne and I have this conversation all the time that so many people that we meet, just like ourselves, kind of almost accidentally found ourselves in educational technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so what has your journey looked like getting to where you are now?
Well, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. My technology background comes from the fact that I was in the Air Force for 8 years. Now I'm going to date myself here. I graduated high school in 83, and you and Corinne are probably laughing at this point.
I'm laughing because that's the year I was born.
Yeah, I get that. So
you're very youthful. I would not have guessed that.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well,
And
you really are.
I'll be sending the check later on for that compliment. So I was in the Air Force, and it was just in a period where this is really before personal computers, before the internet, all that kind of stuff, which I think a lot of people hearing this would think, that now we're talking 1800s. But I joined the Air Force in 83, and it just so happened that based on my experiences and everything, I got moved into some specialized programs. These were very high-tech programs. I worked with the stealth fighter, the stealth bomber. I worked in, which now everybody knows exists, Area 51 and such. But I was the young guy. And so as technology was brought to the office, all the older folks looked at me and just said, "Hey, young guy, you figure it out." So there's no formal training originally. I figured technology out from the ground level and then just went from there. So eventually I started working with computer systems as a mission planner, building routes of flight for aircraft. And it was just a very technical field. I got out of the Air Force and decided apparently I didn't want to make any money. So I went into education and I became a high school English teacher. So for 10 years, I was a high school English teacher, and that is where my passion has always been, is in education. I've never done anything that I enjoyed more than teaching.
Now, can I ask you a question
Sure.
quickly? I'm just curious, going from military and technology and flight paths and that kind of stuff, how you chose English.
It's interesting. I didn't know. Well, I will tell you, I had two things that I thought about.
Okay.
One was I thought about going into law.
Okay.
And I had already started pre-law and everything while I was in the Air Force, and I was thinking to go down that route. And I was talking to my ex-wife's uncle, who was an attorney, and I said, I'm thinking about either law or becoming a school teacher. And he said, well, why do you want to go into law? And I said, because I want a Jaguar XJS convertible. And he said, okay, and why do you want to go into education? And I said, I've always enjoyed teaching. And I love language arts, and I'm a storyteller, as you guys can probably tell from this podcast. and I had a passion for it. And he says, okay, so you have something you want to buy, and then you have something you have a passion for. Which do you think is more important? And so that did it. So I went into education. Like I said, became an English teacher, taught for 10 years, and just absolutely loved it. But I was that teacher who had technology skills. So I literally had a website before the district did. I had a classroom website before the district had a website.
Oh, wow.
I was posting my students' grades, obviously without identifying them. I was posting assignments. I was communicating with parents. And I saw the strength and advantages to that technology. As a great example, teachers used to always complain about the parent calls and says, why is my kid failing? And that's when you say, well, because your kid has never turned in an assignment. I didn't get those calls. The parents knew what was going on. They could see it online. And so I saw the efficiencies in it. I had kids who would say, I went home and my parents posted take my grades to my bedroom door. It was that kind of thing. And parents really appreciate it. So eventually the superintendent came to me and said, hey, we have an opening for the technology director, was supervisor of technology. And he said, we want you to apply for it. So kind of like you said, by accident, It was never my intent. It wasn't a path I intended to go down.
Yeah.
But I went ahead and did that. And so I went into that role, did that for another 5 years, I think. So it was 15 years into education at that point. And then I got the bright idea that I wanted to make money. So for 5 years, I left education and I went corporate, which was an excellent experience because technology in the corporate space is vastly different than education, both in its needs, in its operating practices and stuff, best practices and all that. And I learned an enormous amount while in that in that commercial space. I also made a whole lot of good money, which was nothing like education. But back to my passion, after 5 years, I thought, this is just not my passion. And the money didn't matter. And I came back in education at that point to the ESC. So that's kind of the path that took me down. And my passion for technology education comes from when I was a teacher. And I didn't have the resources then that we do now. And so now I go in and I train teachers, and they must think I'm this crazy geek guy because I am so excited about being able to build video libraries and the way to distribute lessons to kids and the opportunities you give kids. I mean, we talk about differentiated instruction. My goodness, if you can embrace technology, understand how to use it, you can absolutely do that and you can make students an active part of the learning process versus when I was a teacher, it was basically I'm standing in front of the class, giving them the information. They're supposed to absorb it and then regurgitate it to me in some manner. And
Yeah.
now they're an active part of the learning process. And in fact, I get to be an active part of the learning process through the kids.
That's great.
That's interesting. That's something that keeps coming up as we talk to people. The moving from students as consumers to students as creators,
Right.
and how important and impactful that is to student learning.
Absolutely. And I always prided myself on having exciting, interesting classes, being really engaging students.
Right.
My parents asked me when I decided to go into education, they said, "Why in the world would you go into education?" I was not the best behaved kid in school because I was bored to death. And I said,
Yeah.
"Well, because I wanted to be the class clown in school and I wasn't allowed to be, but now I can be."
Uh-huh.
But it
Now
was
you
always
can
because
be.
I enjoy. Yeah, I get it. I'm on stage. I
Yeah.
love teaching because I love seeing the kids learn. I see them light up and all that kind of stuff. And so I was always very passionate about that. But what I found is even what they call the good kids, the kids who always got the good grades and everything, they were still often bored to death
Mm-hmm.
because we weren't engaging them.
Yeah.
And now
Right.
we can make it student centric, and they can determine in many ways the best way that they learn. They can use this technology to show, to highlight, to demonstrate the knowledge that we've given them, and it's their way of saying, "This is I can prove to you I've learned these concepts. Let me show you," as opposed to me saying, "Show me that you've learned this concept in this way." And it's not always the best way for kids.
Right.
Yeah. Which I have to backtrack just a little bit because I'm curious when the superintendent came to you to ask you to apply for the
Mhm.
technology position. When you made that transition from English teacher to now technology person for the district, what did that role look like? Like, were you training the people and how did you get people to buy in?
It's a great question, and I've talked to people about that beginning experience, but you could hit on something else. So the truth of the matter is, I was in a district, what was Northmont, and we had at the time about 6,000 students. We had 9 buildings, and we had 600 something personnel. I'm estimating. I think it was like 635. And we're talking, custodial, bus drivers, custodial staff, teachers, the whole works. I'll start off by saying I was absolutely and utterly ill prepared for it. It wasn't the technology part necessarily. It wasn't even the administrative part. It was there was the maturity part
Mm-hmm.
because to that point, the most mature job I had, even in the Air Force, you're so guided, and there are so many
Right.
regulations and everything. You don't have a great deal of latitude to move around and just do things.
Yeah.
Here I was, a 10-year educator with a bachelor's, no administrative experience, didn't have the administrative degree or anything, and I get put in this role. I had a staff that was fairly large. I want to say about 12 staff members with
Oh, wow.
some within the elementary schools, and we had 7 of them at the time. They each had a librarian who was a media specialist, and they did some troubleshooting on the front end. They didn't report to me, but they were in support of the technology department, and so you kind of had these quasi roles. So basically, 16 to 19 people that I worked with about I think 12 to 14 or so that were actually under my direct supervision. Supervising people wasn't really the problem. I figured out very quickly how to do budgets, how to create strategic plans around technology and everything. But what I found was it completely removed me from the role of being in the classroom. So there was no PD from me. It was arranging PD,
Right.
providing opportunities for PD, but it wasn't me going in and working with the teachers. It was an administrative role, a cabinet level administrative role in a large district, and I had not been there before. Frankly, I kind of had to act like I knew exactly what I was doing, and as long as budgets were right and nobody was complaining and all that, it was fine. But I completely lost that ability to get in there and impact teachers at that curriculum level. Now, we also had a curriculum department, and the two departments combined. So we supported the technology department, supported the curriculum department, They went out and did a lot of that training, but I was not in that role any longer.
So all of that stuff that you were passionate about that moved you to use technology, you kind of lost in that position.
I did. And I'm not saying it was not a bad model by any means. I still to this day think the world of the district and everything. And it was just that I don't think when I took the job, I don't think I necessarily understood that I was going to lose that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, having no administrative experience, it's not that I did a poor job or anything. I think it was just I wasn't passionate about it and was far more administrative than I realized something like that would be. And that was my first time out of that education role. So what I'm doing now, while I don't have as big a district to work with or as many people and all that, if you can certainly get involved in that ego part that thinks you're a big wig in a district. I'm so far beyond that, and my passion is back because I get to work one-on-one with the staff. And even within districts that we support, I've provided professional development training either in large settings or within the classroom, one-on-one in the classrooms for all the districts in both counties. And that's my favorite thing to do. I absolutely love that.
So on that note, how do you get them to buy in? Like, how do you get them excited now that you're back kind of one-on-one with them and getting them excited about using technology with their students?
That's a great question. Some people are just ready to do it anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Some people are not opposed to it, but nervous. And then there are those who just say, I'm going to stereotype a little bit. So I don't mean this quite literally, but you have those people who say, and I've had people say to me directly, I have 2 years till I retire. I'm not going to learn this. I'm not going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, his name is Brad. He repeated to me what a superintendent said once. He said, when it comes to technology and education, he said, you're going to have people who are going to walk, you're going to have people who are going to jog, and you're going to have people who run. And he said, and that's okay. What we're not going to have is somebody standing still. And so what you have to do is look at people and say to yourself, okay, you have people who are passionate, and I don't have to convince them. Mm-hmm. I just need to give them the resources.
Yeah.
And maybe some help, some guidance here or there, but they're going to take it and they're going to run with it. Then you have those joggers, those people who are saying, I'm willing to try this, but you have to give me support. And if you don't and it doesn't work, I might bail on you. So you really have to keep in touch with them, keep them motivated, support them, encourage them. And then those ones who say, I don't want any part of this, they're the ones where you have to say, look at how this impacts the students. And often it's showing them what others in their building have done. Mm-hmm. And when they see other teachers doing it, then if you're passionate about education, you're going to have to say to yourself, this really is what's best for my students. And if this is what's best for them, and this is how they're going to learn better, then I've got to put myself aside and I've got to get on board with this because it's really about my students. Yeah. And as long as they have that attitude, you'll get them there.
That's great. I like the analogy.
It wasn't mine.
Because even if you're kind of walking behind them, just nudging.
Right. Yeah. Right. Sometimes they're standing still and you have to give them a little push.
Yeah.
Right.
Try this.
Yeah. And if you can get some of your runners to connect to your walkers.
Yes.
Get that core group that's evangelizing to kind of reach out a little bit. That's always helpful too. And there's nothing like a little I wouldn't call it peer pressure, but pressure from the students. Like once you get the students excited, they want to do that in their other classes too. So that can help as well.
That's a good point, Corinne.
Working with the educators to do some fun stuff.
That's a really good point. Yeah. If kids come into a classroom and they say to the teacher, well, Mr. So-and-so's class or Mrs. So-and-so's class, we do all of this. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very hard for the teacher to say, I'm going to just forget all that and ignore you. But you were talking about others motivating teachers. And I can think of a school district in particular. I was really impressed with their staff. They're in Darke County. I won't say their name because maybe I'm not supposed to, but it's, as a positive statement, they were really working hard as a district plan to move teachers into really adopting technology as a way of delivering curriculum and such. I mean, they had really decided this is the direction we need to go. So we had been working with the staff over the course of a year, doing professional development with them and everything. And a lot of their staff who were those joggers or runners did go back to those who were struggling and said, let me come in your class and help you. And they were so supportive with one another. I heard that anecdotally over and over. And I was really, really impressed with them. And then COVID hit. So I haven't trained with them or done anything with them since because, of course, they're just trying to deal with the whole COVID thing. But I thought, boy, if there was a district who hit it right when they needed to, that was it. Because once COVID hit, I think they were probably as well prepared as any district because they had the foresight to do it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Recognizing early. I'm going to now, I'm going to pull this from way back because you just kind of mentioned it, but the video lesson libraries, could you explain what that is?
Sure. Yeah, what I always tell teachers when I'm doing training with them and I talk about a video-based library system, I start with, usually it's in a conversation about a specific add-on. It's an add-on for Google Docs. And again, I won't say the name of the add-on right here. Anybody can contact me. I'll tell them because I don't know if there are some copyright reasons why I can't say this over a podcast. But what this particular app does is it allows you within a Google Doc to highlight a word, a paragraph, whatever, and you can leave an audio comment for students. Now, this can be a completely unique audio comment, or you can record a series of comments that are in your library. So, for example, as an English teacher, what I found is I would get the essays in. I tell the kids what they're supposed to do and everything. All right, eventually I got the essay. And I go through and I grade it and I'm bleeding all over it with red pen, or eventually we said green pen because red's, I don't know, a violent color or something. It doesn't really matter.
Yes, I graded in green and purple.
Yeah, so it would take so long to grade 150 essays. And so I started shortening things down. So if a kid had a fragmented sentence, I would write frag. And I kept getting frustrated because I didn't see a change from essay to essay. I kept writing frag. And it occurred to me, I can write that all day long. If a kid doesn't know what a fragmented sentence is, it's irrelevant whether I write it or not, because I'm only identifying what the issue is. If they don't know what it is, then it's pointless. And then I thought, well, how in the world do I address this? I can't reteach this. It's either something they should have known when they came to my class, or I taught it early in the year, they didn't retain it or whatever. And I can't go back and reteach everything. Well, you can. You absolutely can. So I looked at this add-on and I thought you could have a whole library of audio lessons that reteach the subject. But on top of it, this particular add-on would allow you to add links to whatever you want. And I thought, well, you could add a link to a YouTube video. Then I started taking that to the next step. And I thought, well, for every account we have, and I'm going with Google districts, but if you're using Office 365, the technology exists there as well. They just have different names, for their applications. So I thought, okay, I could teach a lesson, record it, add it to my YouTube channel, which is, I can have it contained within my school district. So I don't have to be embarrassed that it's just out there in the general public, the wild, wild west of YouTube.
Right.
I can maintain it within my school's domain. So only our students can see it, or even only my students can see it. I can record as many lessons as I want that teach a concept. Then when I use that add-on app, I could say, this is a fragmented sentence, refer to this video, add the link, and they can go have that concept retaught to them. So in fact, I can reteach a concept. I can reteach it as many times as that kid wants to rewatch that video. Likewise, we're empowering parents, because when my daughter came home in the 6th grade and wanted help with math, I said, sure, I can help you with this. And I start going through it and she starts saying, no, Dad, we can't, that's not how we do it. And I got the right answer and I'm frustrated. I was like, yes, this is the answer. And she's saying no. And it's this big clash. It's like, you can't do it this way. We have to do it. And then there was all this crying. And then she told me to quit crying. And, and I realized that if the teacher had had a video out there, I could have watched the video and learned how the teacher taught that concept. And then I have the ability to say, oh, I get it now. Now let me show you. So it's not just empowering the student to go back and learn. It's not just giving resources to the student who happens to miss the class and need that makeup time. It's also empowering parents to become part of the education process so they can actually watch these videos, learn, and help their own kids. So that's how it all started. And I encourage teachers to create these video library lessons. And if teachers collaborate, you can have teachers teaching multiple subjects, put them all in one library, shared library. You can get students to record lessons. And if the student is right, if the way they're teaching is correct, add it to the video library. Students may want to hear from other students more than they want to hear from the teacher.
Sure.
So there are plenty of ways of doing this. The other thing I found is one of the obstacles for teachers seem to be the hardware itself, the technology. And I've said, we don't have to fight over the technology. You have a cell phone in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You can go out and for $30 on Amazon, you can buy a wireless microphone. You can connect it to your cell phone. And I literally once saw a teacher take a broom handle, stick it in a flag stand, zip tied her phone to the broomstick, and had the wireless microphone. She hit the record button to do the self video, and she went up and taught the lesson on a whiteboard.
Wow.
Well, the audio was excellent because she has the mic on her lapel or her near her. So the audio was excellent. The video captured everything that was on the board. That's about as cheap and simplistic as you get. But let's face it, we're in education. We didn't tend to do cheap and simplistic all the time.
Yeah, we do.
So I said, you don't need a major Hollywood production. You just need the kids to be able to access the content, the concept again. And so I'm a huge proponent of building these video libraries for kids. And then once they're there year after year after year.
Right. You're just building on it.
Yeah.
You have a student that's absent or a student that comes in the middle of the year and you've got all that content already. Yep. And I loved that you were talking about students creating these too, because if there's one way you can make sure that a kid's going to remember something, it's have them teach it.
Absolutely.
Have them teach it to the other kids.
Yeah. We all know as teachers, I remember the beginning of the year, let's say if I'm teaching freshmen, they come in and I think, oh my goodness, I have to reteach half of the 8th grade year.
Yeah.
I probably don't really have to. What if I said at the beginning of the year, we're going to start off with the first few weeks of you're going to create lessons on these individual concepts. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's just those things that they came in the class that they should have known, be it grammar issues or writing issues or whatever.
Right.
Have them create videos and say to them, you're creating this video so we can send this down to the 7th graders or the 8th graders. That's your audience.
Right.
And so they're reinforcing their own knowledge and recalling it, going back and maybe even relearning it in some cases. But now the audience is somebody else, not just the teacher. And when kids have an audience that's another student, they tend to take it a whole lot more seriously. They don't want to be embarrassed or whatever. They want to get it right.
Right.
That's fantastic.
And I like the idea of the kids being involved. And I think something that sometimes keeps teachers from really diving into the technology is one, like you said, like the actual technology itself can be daunting, but also just they become overwhelmed with the big picture of it instead of the like small steps you can take to get to the big picture. So bringing the kids in and you're building this library, it suddenly becomes more manageable.
Yeah,
I think so. I love that. I love that idea.
And really, you're not doing any more necessarily than you would be doing other than just remembering to turn on the camera.
Absolutely. And you can even go beyond that. Like a lot of people don't realize that a smart board has a record feature on it. You're already on the board anyhow, so just record it. Or, if you're projecting it, if you've got your computer set up to just a regular projector, we'll take smart board technology out or whiteboard technology. If you're projecting it, there are plenty of applications that you can get. Screencastify is one. Now, granted, it will only record on the free version. It will only record 10 minutes at a time. I don't think lessons need to be more than 10 minutes, but you can just turn that on and go up and teach your lesson. It's recording everything that's on your screen. Google Meet is now. I think it's changing now, but during the pandemic period, Google Meet would allow you to record.
Or Zoom.
Right.
Using Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. So you have these platforms.
And there's Screencast-O-Matic, there's Loom.
Yep.
We'll compile a list of all these.
There are just tons of resources out there. And I've told teachers, you don't even have to have a live audience. You can just pull these platforms up and you're the only one in it. Just record what's on your screen. If you have a touchscreen computer or something, that adds some additional abilities where you can literally write on the board. I'm thinking, for math teachers, stuff like that. But there are lots and lots of options out there that are either free or very inexpensive. And so if somebody says they want to do it, there's no reason they can't. If somebody says they want to and they come up with excuses why they can't, well, then that really means they probably don't want to. So there's just really no reason nowadays why you can't do this if you really want.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. What is your favorite technology tool or resource or tip or trick that you feel like all educators should know?
I think in the K-12 space right now, most schools are using Google. But of course, there's Office 365. And again, I'm going to speak to Google because within Office 365, you have similar tools.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about the Google platform, I think Google Classroom is outstanding for having a central way of distributing assignments and keeping things in a central place. So if you get into the curriculum tools, the ability for teachers to work within Google Docs and some of the add-ons that you can get through Google Docs allows you to have interactive time with students that you would not normally. So, as an example, when I was an English teacher, if I had 25 students in my classroom and they're working on some writing assignment, I went through the entire writing process. You're going to draft, you go through revision, proofreading, revision, all that kind of stuff. So I can walk around and I can only hit so many students in a given 50-minute period.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of students in that class who did not get any of my time or my attention. And then the next class comes around, we're in the next stage of the writing process. And so you're getting very little one-on-one time with students. And it tends to be sporadic, and it tends to be the students who struggle more. But that doesn't mean that students who struggle less can't improve their own writing. So they're really getting shortchanged. And then the next class comes in. Well, if we use tools that are interactive like Google Docs, and of course there's still slides and sheets and other things, but if we use that interactive tool, then I'm no longer restricted to that 50-minute period that I have with the students. Even if they're out of my class, during my planning period, during my supervision period, during, when I'm at home, I can go get those documents. I can read through them and I can provide real feedback to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that feedback can be a little time consuming, not as time consuming as the traditional grading kind of thing, but through the process, you're giving real feedback, which means on the back end, where normally I would grade the final paper and it takes me tons of time to grade it because I'm trying to add all these comments. Well, what I've done is I've shifted that time that I would spend on the back end to the front end. They're going to turn in a better quality assignment to me that's far more reflective of what they've really learned through the process. And it's going to take me a lot less time to grade. So I'm really putting my time in the front end where they need it more, giving them more instructional time that they need. And then, as I was saying, there are add-ons for all these applications that add greater functionality. So be it, I'm going to name that one. It's Kaizana is the name of it. I may be mispronouncing the name of it.
Oh, yeah, we're familiar
Yeah,
with
that's
that.
a great one. But there are just a ton of different ones, and some that for those who think they're teaching at the elementary level, let's say, K through 3. And a lot of them just say, well, these things aren't really appropriate for my students. I would beg to differ. There are plenty of ways you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not nearly as intensively as you would, at the secondary level, but there are certainly plenty of things out there you can use, plenty of add-ons you can use with these students. And so when you take the core function of some of these applications, then you add to that the added functionality of add-ons, then I think that you are giving kids the opportunity to have more of your time and input on assignments. And that's where the real learning happens. We all know if we could get our class sizes down to 5 kids per class, they'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
And our biggest obstacle is trying to split our time up amongst all of our students.
Mm-hmm.
And so you gain so much curricular time by using these different products. So it's not that there's one specific thing I would say. Of course, I'll always go back to video libraries are a great tool. This to me, this is as important a thing to build out as adopting a new textbook.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you told me every 10 years we're going to adopt a new English text, which is about where a school district might be based on funding, or over the course of that 10 years, we build a video library that teaches all of the concepts that are covered in our content standards. Well, I'll take the latter. And you can keep the book because Romeo and Juliet doesn't really change.
Yeah.
The stories don't change. It's not the stories we're trying to teach, it's the concepts. And I'd much rather build that out.
Right.
Which is a long-winded way of me saying that video libraries are awesome.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us for this episode of For the Love of EdTech. Yeah. What are some key takeaways that you hope that teachers get from this episode speaking with you?
I would say that teachers who are passionate about teaching have to see that technology is part of teaching now. It's not really an option any longer. It's as integral a part of your pedagogy, your curricular delivery as any vehicle we've used in the past. So the textbook, the whiteboard, whatever, it's all the ways we used to teach, those same concepts are there. We just have to incorporate or integrate technology into that. And maybe the best approach is, rather than saying, I have to take on technology this year, maybe instead say, I'm going to start taking on some technology this year. And if you just said once a week, I'm going to make a 10-minute lesson. That 10-minute lesson may take you 30 minutes to create. But if you did that once a week, and we have, 26 weeks that we're in session, you'd have a library of 26 lessons. And by the next year, it doubles, and so on. And so it's like anything else. If you take it in small chunks, eventually it becomes manageable. But the tools are there. And reach out to those who are already doing it. Don't be embarrassed if you're not familiar with it. Stand up and say, hey, I need help with this. And reach out to those people who are already doing it and get help from them.
That's great advice.
People who love technology love talking about technology.
As you can tell from my talking.
And they love helping other people do it. Yeah. They would love to help you. I can almost guarantee it.
Yeah.
The closest thing I get to teaching right now is training teachers. And that's my favorite part of this whole job, is working with teachers and training them.
Thanks for some great conversation today, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm super.
We'll look forward to the next time. We're roping you in for another session.
As many as you want. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today. If you like our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released.
For more information about our podcast and to access links and resources referenced in this episode, check us out at fortheloveofedtech.org.